There we are.
Yes, we are live. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Power Parenting session hosted by Olive Tree Resources. The goal of Olive Tree Resources is to provide training services and resources for teenagers, for teens, as well as families. And so that's our goal. And every month on the first Tuesday, we come with our Power Parenting sessions. And POWER stands for Parents Overcoming through Wisdom, Education, and Resources. And so we try to hit topics that relate to our teens. So as parents, we can do better to embrace, empower, and elevate them, because this is a very transitional time for them. And it gets difficult. And so we have a wonderful guest with us today. Miss Ashley Manger is here. She is going into her 22nd year of education at New Albany High School. And she has actually been there her whole 22 years, right? Or going into 22 years. Yeah. That speaks to her loyalty, her faithfulness, her dedication to our students, to families, and to the community, and to New Albany High School, which is a great educational place here locally. And so she has definitely demonstrated, number one, that pride and that loyalty that she has to the community through education. And so I could not have thought of a better guest to have today, because she's impacted my life. She's impacted my family's life. She's helped my oldest son in ways that I don't probably even know about, because I trust her totally. That's just the type of person that she is. She's one of those people that you want on your side, and to be that second voice for you as a parent. Because we know in previous sessions, we've talked about how as parents, we need those units. We need the village to help us. We need other people when we don't have things that those other people can supply. And Miss Ashley has done that for my family. So I want to just thank her and honor her here openly on this space and platform. She knows how I feel about her personally, but just openly to everyone, because she's planted seeds to enhance even my children's lives, even my daughter, my youngest child, trying to get her to swim.
Yes.
Like,
we still do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Explore something different, pushing her out of her comfort zone, and trying to help her see the greater in her. Those things are needed. And you do that not just for my children, but I could probably speak for everyone who will either watch this live or on replay, that you have touched so many lives. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And we're going to hear from you today, because I know you have some things I want to say this. Listen, you all, she has 3 wonderful children, young adult children. And one has already completed college.
Mm-hmm.
And she has 2 currently in college. Mm-hmm. So she is speaking not only from her professional experience, but also as a parent, from things that she has lived.
Oh, yeah.
She has lived. Mm-hmm. And has helped her children navigate through those teen years, and even now the young adult years. So we're looking forward to hearing your wisdom that you're about to give us tonight. So I'll just turn it over to you so you can kind of share and give us some insight on our topic tonight: teens and the education of the future.
Oh my. Well, thank you, April. Thank you. First and foremost, it is a pleasure to be with you, to be with all of you. And you know how I feel about you. We are kindred spirits. We just connected, and it's a powerful connection. And as for your children, you complimented mine. I can repay you with that, because your children are fantastic. I love them all dearly. They are just great, great human beings. And that is a tribute to you and to Gary and the roles you've played in their lives as they've grown and developed into these emerging adults, but also just your guidance and your stewardship, and they're exemplary children. So You know, maybe that's the kindred nature. You know, you say that about mine, and I think, oh, yeah, well, I don't really do laundry very much, kind of thing. And I want to pick, but I think that's what does bring people together. And I try to be that person in all my relationships to help unite and kind of find those, those those things that unite us versus divide us, so we can be that unit.
You're good at that. Yes.
So I try. I'm not always successful, but I certainly try. But I appreciate you asking me to be part of this and this is my first time, folks. So, and I tend to kind of talk a lot. So it makes it great. I'm a great teacher for that, if that alone. So
right.
I never run out of things to say. But I have, as April said, I've been teaching for now just finished my 21st year, going into my 22nd year. And I've always been at New Albany, and not a native of New Albany. I grew up just outside of here, but fell in love with high school and teenagers. I know that's hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around, like, how do you fall in love with teenagers? But I did. It's the right fit for me. I remember still, all these years later, what it was like to navigate those waters. And I think they appreciate that, that I haven't forgotten. I don't really look at the past through rose-colored glasses, like everything, we were perfect and we never did anything wrong. And, we never skipped school, and we never did, we never talked back, because that's not true. It's simply not true. Like, kids, and I've said this to April several times, or I've said this to you several times, kids really aren't that much different than we were. They're not. The human animal hasn't changed that much. The environment in which we live and the circumstances that we face have, to a degree. All of us are navigating a pandemic. Most of us, for the first time. Few were involved in the last one, but but kids are not really all that different than we were, and they appreciate hearing that. Like, I kind of tell them all the time, you didn't invent most of this stuff. You really didn't. You just didn't. Whatever it is they're talking about, you didn't come up with it. It's been done before. So I have a deep appreciation for them, where I think sometimes we tend to think that they're young and their opinions aren't valid, or their fears aren't the same. They're not relevant or they're not real fears because they're not in the real world yet. And they're not. And that what will surprise a lot of people is that a lot of kids in this day and age are in the real world. They're very much in the real world. One is the real world is brought to them in an immediate sense, 24/7 real world news. When you and I were teenagers, we didn't have 24/7 news, and we didn't have Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all of that. We didn't have access to it 24/7. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the channel at your TV went off at night. You had no more television. We had 4 local channels, and that's all you had. And cable was that was fantastic, but it still went off, kind of thing. So they're in the real world. They may not have a full-time job like you and I do, and they may not have a mortgage to pay like you and I do, but they're in the real world, if anything, because it's right there in their laps all the time. Yeah. And we have to keep in mind that they've never navigated those waters. And we have to help them. As much as we're learning about new stuff and new technology, and they're way ahead of us, they still don't know how to, they don't understand a mortgage, and they don't understand how you don't just go buy commercial real estate property. I had a kid ask me that not too long ago. He wanted to buy a commercial building, and I said, how many hundreds of thousands do you have saved? And he's like, that's how much they are? I'm like, yeah. I mean, you're not going to buy a building for $10. That's not how that works. So anyway, my point being, they're no different than we were. They're just dealing with things in a different way than we had to deal with them. But in keeping that connection with them, I hear you, I understand you, let me help you. It's proved to be part of the success I've had. So and they will tell you oftentimes, they don't want, I probably should hold that thought for another, we'll have to tie that up in a minute because I'm going to go off on a tangent and it doesn't really make sense with this one. So, but teenagers are just a different animal. They're programmed differently than we are. Even biologically, their circadian rhythms, their internal clock is set later than ours. And it's going to be for a few more years. And their frontal lobe development is lagging behind. The males lag behind the females, and they're not going to fully develop, good rational thought and good judgment and all those things until much later, they're early to mid 20s. So they're just kind of walking around, and I don't mean this really in a derogatory way, but they're a little dumb too. They're just kind of dumb for things. But I find that they're very receptive to guidance, and they're very receptive to structure, and they're very receptive to rules and kind of drawing the line and knowing that they might want to push those lines, but if somebody's there to say, this is why we have the rules, and this is why the rules are, and this is what's a consequence of breaking those rules or whatever it might be, they're okay with that. Because inherently humans like structure. We don't like chaos. We don't like disorder. We like an ordered society. We like norms and values, and maybe they differ a little, but we still like that it's all there to guide us. Teenagers aren't any different from that. So, and I talk like something a lot, but it's like all children, really.
Yeah. I'm gonna put up something that you said because I thought it was good. That you said, I hear you, I understand you, and I support you. So when they recognize those three things, that's something we can do as parents, guardians, support structures and systems that villages that help the raising and the nurturing and the steering of those teens. If we keep those three things in perspective, because they want to know that they're being heard, that you understand, even if you disagree.
That is correct.
That at least you understand. I understand what you're saying. And then I like how you actually use this method all the time is you provide support, but you give them the raw truth of, that doesn't make sense. I hear you though.
Yes, very much so.
And then you bring it back around for them where they can hear you because you want it to come back around to where they hear you. And I think sometimes when we don't allow them to know that we hear them, we understand them and support them, that's when they shut down and people get frustrated and think, oh, these teens are just not listening. Well, they didn't feel like they were being heard.
Correct. And that goes without saying for any of us. The minute we feel like someone's not listening to us, we're done talking. We can sit there and we can nod our head, or we can just sit quietly with the game face on and wait till that person is done. They're just talking at us because we're not listening anymore. We're done. That's all humans. Teenagers are really good at that, though. They're highly emotional anyway. Some of us continue to be emotional well into our adult lives, but it's a heightened state. I mean, they're on an emotional roller coaster all the time. They start all the time on a high and they get to a low and they're back to a high, sometimes within the same class period. I mean, they're constantly, and again, I do take it back to there's all this in their face all the time. They know even if something isn't happening at the moment, something's going to happen. And they're going to be forced to deal with something, whether good, bad, or otherwise. And so it's almost like they're always kind of on alert. Like, what's the next thing that's going to happen to me, about me, to my friends, to my family, to whatever. And then when they want to talk about it, or they want to ask for guidance about it, to be ignored or to be for someone to speak to them in a real condescending manner, like you're making a big deal out of nothing, or, that kind of, I think that kind of makes it worse for them because that's part of that. You're not hearing me. You're not listening to me, instead of as the adult or as the person who's in a position of whether it's authority or whatever guidance or whatever it might be, saying, okay, go ahead and say it. What do you need to say? Or what do you want to talk about? Or whatever it might be that they need at that moment. When we shut them down because we think that they're just young and they don't get it yet, they just don't understand, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything for empowering them.
Empower. That's good, because that's our goal. Even here, I want, if you don't mind, if you could touch on something that I took note of, because I think it's a good point to discuss, is why all parents, this was through a conversation we had, why all parents should let their child take a psychology course.
Okay, one, because I teach it. So send them to New Albany and have them take my class. Actually teach 3 of them: AP psychology, abnormal psychology, and developmental psych. So they can have me for 2 years. It's great. But otherwise, the serious answer to that is, psychology is really what it boils down to is the study of the science behind the theories and the science behind human behavior and why humans behave, that the human animal, why it behaves the way it behaves. And, in the last few decades, several decades, the emphasis has been studying human behavior from a biological, a psychological, and a sociocultural perspective or perspectives. So in what's called the biopsychosocial model. And then it's broken down even further into more subunits the more you get into psychology. But the overall look at human behavior is, there are all these different components from why we make decisions on everything from what we want to be when we grow up to why we like peanut butter that's creamy versus crunchy. Kind of, it doesn't matter. That behavior is behavior. We tend to think about behaviors as things that we can see, but it's not even just the behaviors we see. It's our thought processes and our patterns of thinking and all the things that just make us the higher ordered animal, the one that's superior to everyone else, but also makes us the most complex one. And kids dig it. They love it. They love understanding human behavior a little bit better. They initially sign up for it because they think I'm going to teach them about serial killers. And some of them think it has something to do with astrology. I'm like, well, serial killers, yes. Your zodiac sign, not going to talk about it much. But it's just, once we get into it and we start with a look at historical perspectives, and then we get into the biology behind it, and we do a lot of studying on the brain and the body and the connection between the two and the communication systems, the endocrine system and neurotransmitters in the brain and the nervous system. And then they're like, that's fascinating. Like they really get into it. And they're like, I learned this in biology. I learned this in anatomy. And I'm like, yeah, see, there's a purpose. And
coming together. Yeah.
It all starts to come together because psychology can do that. It can bring all these different things together, from history to biology to economics to your social classes. And, they start to see that at the core, the common denominator in all of that is the human animal. And then they're like, oh, this is awesome. So I just actually got an email from a former student's mother. And she said, I wanted to thank you for inspiring. And I don't really know that that's the appropriate term, but that's what she used, because it's hard for me to take those kind of compliments. She said I inspired her daughter, who's graduating from Western Kentucky this year, and then going back there for graduate school to become a school psychologist. And it all started in my psychology class at New Albany High School. And I said, that's probably the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. And if whether someone becomes a school psychologist or they just understand a little bit more why, the serial killer operates the way they operate, or why they can't understand, they get so mad they start crying. Some kids, it's everything. I mean, it's just so encompassing that it's hard to find something that no one likes to talk about. So
No.
yes, encourage your children to take a psychology class. And if you haven't, or if you're interested in it, understanding, I think everyone should. I think everyone should have a deeper understanding of how humans actually operate. And it's just mind blowing.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Another thing we touched on was even as far as education and when, your child gets in high school, what parents should and should not stress about. We talk about things that, they stress about and they worry so much about those things. What really matters?
Well, so this could take a couple of different sessions of this show.
Part 1 and part 2.
Part 1, 2, 3, all the way probably to part 10. We might have a whole franchise here. So I thought about this from our last conversation up until today. I kept thinking, well, this and this, and I made little points of things that, they really shouldn't stress about this. And then I realized parents are entitled to stress too. You're providing everything you can provide for your children in hopes that they seize those opportunities. So by no means do I even intend to imply that don't stress about anything, parents. It's all going to be fine. Hold your kids accountable. That's the number one thing I think parents should be stressed about. Not really stressed, should emphasize it, or should really enforce. And that's accountability. And by letting your children be accountable for things, you tend to start eliminating some of the stress, I think. If I can tie this together in a prettier package, I will. So I will talk to any parent who contacts me, 100%. But it's not the first thing I'm going to do, because I'm going to talk to the child first. That might be your child, and it might be, the same child over and over again. But I'm going to talk because he or she is sitting in my class. You are not. I will call, talk, email, whatever I need to eventually if I don't make headway with the kid. But the kid has to be accountable. The student has to be accountable. The child has to be accountable to every person in their life. It can't be, I'm only accountable at home. I'm only accountable at work. You don't matter, Mrs. Manger, or you don't matter, Mr. Brown, or you don't matter, so-and-so, because you're just my teacher. Accountability in the classroom is the same as accountability at home doing chores and at work being on time and everything else. And so holding your kids accountable means making them answer to that accountability, not answering for them.
Yeah.
When, for instance, I had a parent email me the second to last day of school about how to change attendance to show that her child was actually in our class virtually. And I emailed back and said, no, he wasn't. He wasn't there. And she said, well, he said he was. And I said, well, he wasn't. So I had to actually send the screenshot of the meet report that shows he never logged in. And instead of her saying, okay, he needs to fess up to why he wasn't in class, it took a chain of other emails with other teachers to confirm. And it took a good 3 or 4 periods of the day to finally get through all of this, which was, yeah, he didn't log on for the first 3 classes. That's unnecessary stress.
Yes.
If there's a consequence for not logging in and it's an unexcused absence, then he takes the unexcused absence, or she takes the unexcused absence. Look, no college, no branch of the service, nobody from McDonald's to IBM or IBM, I don't even know, it's IBM, Apple, whatever, something, I'm dating myself, is going to look back and go, well, little Ashley, she was unexcused absence from a meet her junior year of high school. We're not hiring her. She can't get in. Like, sometimes you just got to let the consequence happen. I mean, I have a child who missed out on being in the top 20 graduates out of 455, 60 some odd graduates. She finished 23rd because she didn't turn in a paper her sophomore year of high school. And I teach in the same building. where my children attended school. And she thought I might try and help her fix it. And I said, yeah, that was your choice, not mine. And ultimately, it brought her grade down from an A- to a B+. Not a bad grade.
Still not bad.
Not a bad grade, but it dropped the GPA enough that it dropped her out of class standings, class ranks, and she dropped out of the top 20 and ended up graduating 23rd. Not bad. Never disappointed. Never expected her. I never said, you got to be in the top 20. But if I had fixed it for her, or if I had made a big deal about it, it was her choice. Just like it was that kid's choice not to join the meet. It was her choice not to turn in the paper. She had to learn from that. He has to learn from that. And parents, I think a lot of stress that they feel is they want to fix stuff all the time for their kids.
That's good.
Sometimes don't fix it. Just let it happen. They'll learn a better lesson from it if you let it happen. And yeah, dropping from an A- to a B+ is a big lesson to learn. But at the end of the day, she still got into college. She still got $46,000 in scholarships per year. She's doing okay.
Yeah.
It was one grade. And she also learned a lesson. Stress. The number one thing to not stress about is trying to fix stuff all the time for your kids.
That's right.
And if you continue to fix things for them, they're going to expect you to fix it beyond the walls of their high school. And that's where you're really going to run into problems that you can't fix it for them. You can't call IU or Purdue or Hanover or Center or U of L and talk to a professor and have them change their mind.
That's right.
It ends there. You're probably not going to call your kid's boss and say, I'm sorry, he stayed up late last night because we had a family thing and he's going to be late. That's part of what you said. Like, I kind of shoot straight. I say it's from the real person.
And that's great because they need that now. That's the best time to learn that. It's the best time to fall off the bike, if you will.
Yes.
The training wheels are still there.
Yeah.
Still there. I mean, but you fall and scrape your knee. And we're helping you get to the point. And I like the word you use, accountability, to speak for yourself. And even if you have to practice with me, and then I need you to go and articulate that and convey it.
Absolutely.
When you said that, it made me think about someone that I spoke with recently, who is actually one of our team facilitators for the program, Teen Life program. And we were in the middle of a meeting and she says, well, my mom just texted me and my mom said to let you know that I will not be able to work next week because we're going out of town. Okay, I don't have a problem with that, but I use it as a teaching moment. I said, why did you preference that with all of that? Because this is not your mom's job. Right. This is your job. Right. Okay, great. If she reminded you, awesome. Hey, that's a part of family. That's what we do. But I was just showing her how take ownership. You speak to me as if, like you stated, you were at Apple or some other place, because this is your job. Right. You just articulate. Unfortunately, you're letting me know in advance time, which is great professionalism, that hey, next week I will not be available to work. But don't continue to allow them to be not accountable. I mean, that's just a good word. Just not accountable. And I think for her, and it was it's growing, but just feeling more comfortable to say, well, my parents said, or my mom said,
absolutely.
My dad said, it makes them feel comfortable. But when we can push them to say, no, go ahead and say that, or express that, share that, and then teach them how to do it, it just helps them grow. Absolutely. That's all a part of the education. They'll get it from, and I could, first and foremost, I'm a staunch supporter of public schools. I am. If your student attends a private school, that's great. That's a choice. Please follow that path if that's what you choose. But I'm a big supporter of public schools. Mm-hmm.
I think we have an incredible public school system. Obviously, locally, I'm very much, impressed by what we have. My children all attended public schools from the time they were in kindergarten all the way up through high school. But we've gotten soft, really soft in education. It's soft. We can't, and it's a vicious cycle. It's, parents and communities and people outside that really, they don't have any impact. And let me not say that. I don't want to say parents don't have an impact. Like legislators, the state legislatures and governors, even to some degree the federal level, they put some unrealistic expectations on schools across the board.
Mm-hmm.
They're arbitrary. Standards are arbitrary. Test scores are arbitrary. Like they just make up things. Like you have to get this number to be proficient.
So should parents be stressing about that? Should they
No.
be stressing about, oh my goodness, my kid has this test,
No.
Mm-hmm.
Well, number one, it's a moving target all the time. So, and I say no, and I say that maybe a little too flippantly. It's always good to be able to test, to measure, anything, to be able to see if a student has mastered a concept. Okay?
Yes.
Or proficient in something. But the way we go about testing them, or what we're mandated to test them with, are tools that are created by textbook companies. And without going into a lot of the politics of it, textbook companies that create the tests also create remediation tools for it. So there's a certain amount of error that's built into those tests that kids are going to miss, or this percentage is going to fail or not pass. They don't really fail those tests. So they'll have to remediate and they'll have to try again because it's a business. I mean, they're businesses, So that's something schools can't control.
Okay.
We can't control what a state legislature does.
Yeah.
If you're in a state that is really pushing toward privatization of schools, with different program like voucher programs or things like that, that's that's a mighty machine you're fighting from a public school perspective.
Right.
But we do have the ability to control what we do within the buildings. And I do think that we've gotten a little soft because we're afraid. We're afraid of community pressure. We're afraid of parent pressure. We're afraid of a lot of things that we just don't want to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. Or, we can't do that because it's too controversial, or it's, what? You're suspending kids? Well, you can't suspend that many kids and you can't discipline like that because your school ranking goes down. I mean, it really kind of starts to, starts to spin when you start to think about, they tell us maybe we'll look at we won't grade things. We won't have A, B, C's and D's and F's. And then the schools themselves and corporations are graded on an A, B, C, D, or F scale. Like there's a lot of hypocrisy that, and so it's this constant battle. It's the business side of education that it's frustrating. It's frustrating for teachers. It's frustrating for students. It's frustrating for parents. But
so how can parents, support in that process opposed to making it just even more difficult, because it is a complex machine.
Right.
What can parents do to help in that process, even from the student standpoint and supporting at the schools?
At the core, and what I was going to try and bring it back to was public schools provide endless opportunities for kids. I mean, an abundance of opportunities. We have 28 different AP classes or dual credit classes at New Albany High School. We have an AP capstone diploma, and a technical honors diploma, and an academic honors diploma, and a regular diploma. We have all kinds of avenues. Parents want to be part of helping their children map out the path they want to take, not some prescribed path that they think they have to take, or that they think they should be on. Don't worry if your kid doesn't want to take the honors biology. It's okay. They can take the regular biology and they'll be just fine. They're going to get a qualified teacher who's teaching good content because they don't ever want to use biology again. Maybe they want to focus on a higher level math to take because they want to go down the math and I don't know, engineering route. Eventually that's what they think they want to do. Don't stress about, oh my gosh, my kid needs. We have students in the building that will have in their junior year and their senior year, and all three of my children are examples of this. Even though I said don't do it, they loaded their schedules their junior and senior year with 5 and 6 AP classes. And I said, you're crazy. Why are you doing that? Like, you don't need to do. Take an ethnic foods class.
I know, right?
Wellness. Take child development. Take something. Not to say those classes are bunnies, but they're not as stressful as AP.
Not stressful.
Statistics.
Yeah, like, I know.
There isn't colleges and universities, and I cannot say that I have firsthand knowledge of the acceptance process. Like, I work there and can tell you what IU expects, or UK or U of L or Purdue or anybody else. But I can tell you, having 3 kids that are 2 that were at Purdue and 1 who's at Center College, your alma mater there, yes. No admissions counselor said, oh my gosh, I'm so impressed. Like, we took you because you had AP stats and this and this and this and this and this all your junior year. They looked at the well-rounded nature of the things that they did in terms of their academics and athletics and all these other things and said, gosh, we're going to take a chance on you. Mm-hmm. And they could, and they all 3 had different paths. Like, they were better at certain things and they didn't really get hung up on the grades per se. They just said, we like well-rounded kids. We don't really, it's not about, I don't know, you inundated yourself. Yes, it's good. It looks good superficially. Look at all these courses. But it's not the only thing that makes up that student. It's not the be all end all.
That's right.
It's not, and for that matter, even if you take them and you don't
well-rounded.
Yeah, it's there are a lot of there's a lot of benefit to just exposing yourself to lots of different things and finding what you like. And parents tend to think, well, they got to take this and they got to take this and they got to take this because that's what everyone says. Well, that's because a lot of times there's a reason they're saying that to you. Maybe it's administration saying it. Maybe it's a guidance counselor saying it, and they're trying to maybe up the percentages of people that are getting this type of diploma, or they're trying to get more people in this whole set of classes because we get some kind of honor for it and we look good. It's not about making the school look good. And it's not about making that counseling department look good. It's about your kid having a well-rounded but manageable and enjoyable experience. Believe me, they don't get to have a whole lot of fun in school anymore because it's so academic. I know. Forgive me, people. I understand it's supposed to be academic, but you gotta want to come to school. You gotta have fun there.
You said something good. I have to bring, because it really impacted me, and I shared it actually the next day that you said it. I shared it with someone else because it was just so poignant. It was typical Ashley. It was to the point, but it was good. It was good. And you said this: school is their job.
It is.
And just like as adults, we get sick of our job sometimes. They get sick of their job sometimes, which is academics. Like you said, it's all about the academics. So they're like, oh, I'm tired of this. Yes. And so they may have those moments.
Yes.
Where they need to regroup.
And I don't know that I've articulated my thoughts very well with everyone tonight. And April can attest to anyone who's watching this. I do this. I talk a lot, and sometimes I go off on tangents. It all makes sense eventually, maybe, but school is a job for them. It has turned into a job. It is not like school when we were in school. I remember everything from the letter people in kindergarten to having our break time in high school. We had a free period. We don't have free periods. They are in class from first period to seventh period, from 7:40 in the morning till 2:26 in the afternoon, with a 30-minute lunch period. We had PEP sessions. They don't really have PEP sessions. They don't. It's all academic. It's academic, 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 and they get tired and they get frustrated. And yes, you always have that percentage of kids that thrives in that environment. That's what they like to do. They're very academic oriented. That's their nature. They study. They do everything because they want the grades, and that's important to them. That's fine. But the majority of teenagers are still teenagers, and they want to have a little fun. And school's not real fun right now, and it hasn't been for a while. I've been doing this for 2 decades, and it gets progressively more like a job. And I can tell you, the only reason I go back every year is because of those kids. It's not because of all the other stuff that I referenced. Otherwise, I'd be out, 100% out. But the kids, they're important to me. They make it enjoyable for me. They're my fun. And if we don't give them a little fun, if we don't take a little pressure off of them, yes, hold them accountable, but take a little bit of that pressure off of them and take a little bit of our own stress away from them. Yes. Like we're stressing over what they need to take. You shouldn't be stressing over what they need to take. Let them carve a path. There are things they're going to have to take because they're required, but there are things they should just be able to take because they're interested or not interested, and they don't ever want to take it. Like, who cares? In the grand scheme of things, I don't remember anything from calculus class when I was in high school, and I took it. I don't remember anything. I remember my history teacher because he was animated and he, did all kinds of things. But let them carve their path. Don't put your stress on them. They're gonna be fine. It's high school. It's high school. It's like I tell parents of middle schoolers, don't worry that they didn't get in the honors program or this whatever. It doesn't matter. When they get to high school, they can take whatever they want. Does not matter if they weren't in honors math. If they want to take algebra 2 as a freshman, they can take algebra 2 as a freshman. If they've had algebra 1. But you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. There's a lot of unnecessary stress for parents. And I feel for every parent out there because I am one and have been. And I would be lying if I said I didn't get stressed over sometimes what I thought was maybe not the best work ethic or they could have done a little bit better. But they turned out okay, and most all of them do. Like it's unnecessary. Don't stress about that. Stress about here. If you really want my advice, moms and dads out there, and grandmas and grandpas, and anybody else who's responsible for the well-being of that child, get more involved with your schools. Bring your ideas to the schools for ways you can interact with your child and other children and show them that people care about them and care about the fact that they are there and they want, and you want them to have fun and you want them to have opportunities and be more involved, because that's going to create a much better environment for those kids. They're going to feel like, I think a lot of times kids feel like they don't belong there anywhere, whether it's New Albany High School or Jeffersonville High School or Florentville or whatever. They just don't feel like a connection to it because we don't have a lot of community connection. Amazingly enough, it's just a place people go. People go there, they go to school, and
that's good.
Game. I mean, we can draw a good crowd for basketball, but we can't draw a pretty good crowd on PTO night, kind of thing. So get involved, and once you're in the schools, you tend not to stress so much about what's going on in the schools because you know more. I mean, I think a lot of times stress comes from parents not really knowing what's there, what's going on. And I mean, it's important, I guess, for kids.
No, that's good. That's a good point. Well, if you don't mind, I think it's a great segue into, if you want to share even some of I think you made a good point before we came on, of some information that you have in regards to some kind of questions you posed out there for some current students. And if we can end with that, I'll just let you end with sharing some of those. I think that will be impactful to those listening, to hear from the teens. I mean, that's what we want. Let them hear their voice. I like what you said, and I'm going to reiterate this, and this will kind of be somewhat of our 3 points that we hear them, we understand them, and we support them. And that's how we can embrace, empower, and elevate our teens in education. And I'll let you end with some of your thoughts there with what you have.
I'm happy to. So I asked my students anonymously if they would answer a question for me. And I said, what would you tell adults, any adult in your life, if they ask you about what it's like to be a teenager navigating life and school and work and extracurricular activities? Here are some of the responses. Here's one. It doesn't matter how close you and I are. Secrets will come up and it's not your job to find out everything. I need my privacy. You know those parents who are always they gotta know everything and or those grandparents or whatever. I won't pick on just parents, sibling, whatever.
Yeah.
They're just like us. There's some things they don't want to share. Now, obviously, if it's anything that's harmful or anything, you obviously want to pay attention to those things, but you don't always need to know the 411. You don't need to know what's going on all the time.
Yeah.
One bad grade doesn't make a whole semester. So maybe not punish. It says don't punish me for one bad grade. I would agree with that. This one will tug a little. It says it's extremely difficult. I've struggled so much this year and have felt so overwhelmed with the constant pressure from my parents to do my best and to be the best. School is difficult. It causes stress in so many ways it's hard to articulate. Homework, the amount of time you can have to study and trying to work and trying to play a sport. When I get a little dramatic, it's not because I'm a brat, it's because I'm growing up and I'm dealing with life changes. I'm probably dealing with a lot more stuff than you actually know. So please try not to be so hard all the time.
Wow. That's a good one.
It's difficult, a lot of difficulties. We're figuring out who we are, or at least to the best of our abilities. We're also discovering things about ourselves that maybe we didn't even know. I don't have the same set of friends I came into high school with. My priorities have changed, and my friend group has changed because of those. I'm always changing. Let me change.
Wow.
It's a lot of be generous and more understanding. Some of them are a little more difficult to read. I need a break occasionally. That was the one that came up quite frequently.
Yeah.
This person said, I would just tell them it's hard, and I feel like parents don't really think about how stressful life is for us as teenagers. Before teachers or parents get mad and start to punish us for something we did wrong in their eyes, they need to stop and really think what we're going through, because on top of school, work, sports, and other things, we're bound to mess up a little or have an attitude sometimes.
Yeah.
And as I'm reading through them and having read through them, well, here's one that says, being a student athlete is hard. Getting home late, finishing homework late, still trying to get a good night's rest is difficult. It would just be nice to go a little bit easier on us. Not too easy, where we would lose ourself and lose our responsibility, but just enough for us to grow a little and learn to be independent. I also think this person said, I also think we need to stop using the term bully so heavily. Just because someone calls another person a name doesn't mean they're a bully. It just means they're insecure and unhappy. Sometimes they tell you, they tell you a lot. They do. It's really a recurring theme, folks. It's a thing that weaves through this whole discussion, is that they want support, they want structure, but they really want to be empowered. They want to be allowed to make some mistakes. They want to be allowed to make some decisions. And again, I should have prefaced this with nothing about their decision making should ever be risky behavior or dangerous behavior or inappropriate behavior or those types of things. I don't mean to say it's a freak. I'm not a permissive parent by any means.
Let them go.
But authoritative, don't just let it go. Don't let them go. They will go. We did. We went. I went a lot. No. But it's that authoritative approach with some discussion and allowing them to be part of the decision-making process where it's appropriate. That authoritarian doesn't work. Mm-hmm. I mean, I ask my kids all the time, I'm like, how many of you have been grounded? And they'll raise their hand. And I'm like, how many of you have been grounded for the same thing more than once? And they'll raise their hand again. I go, so how'd that grounding work? Because if it worked, you'd never do it again. Mm-hmm. I also say the only form of punishment that actually works is the death penalty. And we don't want that for, breaking curfew. Like, oh, well, there you go, electric chair, because you broke curfew.
Right. Yeah.
But consequences, yes, or degrees of consequences or whatever it might be, but they still, I think, whether it's misbehavior or a poor work ethic at the moment and their grades are slipping or whatever it might be, the discussion has to be there, putting it back in their lap to fix it, to figure it out. Mm-hmm. But knowing that you're not, just you're going to hammer them all the time with everything. I mean, this doesn't work. So,
yeah. No, that's really good. I think it was good for us to end on just kind of hearing their voice in this discussion. And like you said, I heard difficult.
Stressful, hard, difficult, hard. Stressful, hard, mm-hmm. Challenging. Yeah. We got a challenging
for them.
Yeah.
So we should, take note of those key words that did run through all of those as a theme. But then also another word, change. I'm changing. I'm changing. I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm evolving. So giving them space for that, but it's kind of like people who know about cheerleading. I know a little bit because my daughter, did it for a while, as well as gymnastics. Mm-hmm. They would have the spotters there.
Right.
They were ready. They were anticipating. It's kind of, that's how we are as parents, because we have the foresight that they haven't gotten to where we've been through experience. So we're there being that spotter to make sure. Yes, we want them to mount up to the top of that, what the cheerleaders are building, when they have the person at the top, and we want them to get there and to stabilize there. And guess what? Other people are holding them up as they're getting up there too, but we're still that spotter down there. Like, we want to make sure we're going to catch you. And so if we can keep that in mind, that it's okay. And sometimes those young ladies or even a young man who's at the top of that structure sometimes fall. Mm-hmm. And that's a part of it. Yeah. They know that. They know the risk of it.
Right. And that's the same thing in school. That's what we are. That's what your teachers and your counselors and your administrators are too. We're part of that support system. Mm-hmm. And we know that your kids are going to stumble and they're going to make mistakes and they're not going to do well on the test. I tell my kids all the time, you're probably going to flunk the first test you take in here because you've never taken one for me before. You don't know what my tests are like. So don't stress over it. My parents will kill me. They're not going to kill you. I promise. It's a test. It's one. We're there. We'll support them. We'll be that safety net. But we want parents to know. We want the communities to know that we also anticipate they're going to make some mistakes and they're going to stumble and they're going to topple off the top of that pyramid and stuff. And we'd rather work together with you as a community to make sure that they learn from those mistakes and they move forward from those mistakes rather than you trying to fix it, not you specifically, parents trying to fix it or we just kind of brush it under, there has to be, again, that accountability. And so accountability partnerships would be great.
Accountability partnerships. Yes.
And it eliminates stress. I mean, that's part of the don't stress, folks. It's all going to, I promise it's going to be fine. It will. Mm-hmm. It absolutely will.
No, that's great. That's great. Well, I thank you for your time and just sharing
Thank
that
you.
information. It did come all together because all those points needed to be brought out, and it gave us some good insight so that those who've watched and will be watching will gain some things to help them kind of go into the next, especially after last year. This past year was totally different.
Oh my. It's
So
gonna
when
be a
school
whole
starts
different
back
ballgame.
up,
Oh,
yeah. So hopefully when school starts back up, people will even take some information that we gave to not just breathe, don't have as much stress.
yeah,
Let's go into it because this coming year is going to be different and new because
absolutely.
who has experience coming back after all of that?
Hey, we have kids that they've never been in the high school. They've been in high school now for a year and they've never stepped foot in the high school.
Yeah.
Never been in the building.
So different. Yeah.
We have kids in this track from middle school all the way up that haven't been in a school building period for, what now, 2 years, 2.5 years? If you do the cumulative effect of when we let out in March and then they would have transitioned into a new building over the summer, like a fourth grader into fifth grade, or the fifth grade or eighth grade into high school. I mean, it's mind-boggling to think the transition back it'll be a good probably first quarter of school just to get everybody back in school mode.
Yes.
Like, get out of your pajamas and come to class.
Come to class. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Stressful. It's too much stress.
Yeah. We take on that stress for you a little bit. Fine. We'll take it. Just don't send them in their slippers because I don't do slippers. Like put some shoes on in school. You can do that.
Good point. That's really good. Yeah. So thank you again. We appreciate it. And hopefully something that was said will be able to help parents embrace, empower, and elevate their teen to the next level and let them carve their path like we talked about. Yeah. And to relieve some of that stress as we go along, because the future of education is changing. Even now, it's evolving. And so if we just allow ourselves to be open to that, I think we mentioned exposure as well, to that, to see where they're going in their next. It looks a little different than us. We got to remember that. It looks different than what we may have taken in.
But they're not different.
That will help.
They're like us. They're just like us at the core. And when they know that you know that and recognize that, it might scare some parents. It scared me a little bit. I was like, okay, y'all don't need to act like I did, but they know they'll be fine. They'll be fine.
Yeah. They'll be fine. I like something Mindy said. Yes. No slippers.
No slippers.
No slippers.
And
that was a good point.
I would rather them not have pajama pants on too, but I can get past it. If you're not walking around in your fuzzy SpongeBob slippers, I'm happier. So
happier. Yes. So thank you all parents who were able to join us and who will listen to this later. Hopefully you were encouraged to hear, understand, and support your teen as we move into the education of the future. We'll see you next month. Well, wait a minute. I think we're taking a summer break. Yes. We'll see you in August. We're taking June and July to have a summer break, enjoy time with family, and allow your teens to enjoy the summer. Hopefully getting out a little more now that it's freeing up. Hopefully getting out a little more and just relieving some of that stress that being in and the restrictions caused us through this time. So thank you again, Ashley. We appreciate you.
Thank you.